Hi, Matt Meeker here with Innovative IDM to talk to you about how Yaskawa's Tuningless settings can save you time during your servo system startup. If you've tuned very many servo systems, then you've no doubt spent hours and hours adjusting parameters, half dozen, maybe a dozen or more parameters, to try and get the setup on your servo system just right, to get just the right performance for your actual load. And then right when you finally finish, someone walks by and says, "Great, you finished for part A, what about parts B and C?" And you realize that all the work you've done over the last few hours is suddenly wasted. And you have to retune the entire system to get the best possible performance for all the different parts you might possibly carry. Okay, so you do that work, great. A month, 3 months, 6 months from now, they call you back and you say, "Hey, we put a new part on, it's not running well." That's because when you have to tune the parameters for a loading situation, you have to tune for every possible loading situation you might encounter. That's how it is for a lot of servo manufacturers. For Yaskawa, they actually have something called Tuningless parameters. What that means is your system can actually run without having to be tuned. That's actually what we do for the majority of the Yaskawa servo systems we install. We see that only the most aggressive systems actually need to be tuned when using Yaskawa's Tuningless setup. So that means with one of Yaskawa's servo motors, you can leave it in tuningless mode and actually run the system without ever having to perform tuning. How does that work? Just like you know, when we size a servo system, we have to take into account the speed the motor needs to run, the torque the motor needs to apply. But we also have to take into account something called the inertia mismatch or the inertia ratio. Now that simply means the inertia ratio is the moment of inertia between the load you're trying to move and the motor that's moving the load. That inertia ratio is pretty simple to calculate, but depending on the ratio you end up with, that will affect how well your system can actually control itself. So what does inertia mean? Well, very simply, imagine if you're trying to throw a bowling ball versus throw a tennis ball. If right when you're about to release, I say stop, you can stop that tennis ball, no problem. But you might not be able to necessarily stop that bowling ball very well. Now you can stop it because you have enough torque to stop it, but you can't stop it on a dime or very aggressively because of the inertia mismatch between your body and your arm and the tennis ball or the bowling ball. Between the tennis ball and yourself, there's a very small inertia mismatch. I can very quickly stop it. Between the bowling ball and myself, it's a different inertia mismatch. The closer you are to a one-to-one inertia mismatch, the better you are able to control that load. But with Yaskawa's Tuningless setup, you can control even much higher inertia mismatches, in some cases up to high as 40-to-1. And with their Tuningless system, you can actually control your load very well and get very aggressive settling times without having to ever tune. That means that whether you're running part A, part B, part C, or any of those parts, as long as they're within the spec for that servo system, you never have to tune the system, and it will adaptively respond to the load you're applying. This means you can save yourself time in the startup of the system, the very beginning, but you can also save yourself time and headache every time you change the part or you're changing what's running on that system, because the system can respond to the different characteristics of that load. So between the motor and the load, we of course have speed, torque, as well as the inertia ratio. When you take those three things into consideration when sizing, you can eliminate the need for tuning altogether on the majority of applications. When you want to talk about Yaskawa's Tuningless or any other applications for any sort of automation, be sure to give us a call at Innovative IDM. Thanks.